With a new Speaker of the House, Paul Ryan, taking his place in Congress, what does it feel like to work for the Republican Party or for either party on the Hill nowadays? Here to help us answer that question is Shawn Zeller. Shawn is a senior writer for CQ Weekly. That's CQ as in Congressional Quarterly. He writes about a variety of topics there, including lobbying, politics, regulation, and civil service issues. And he joins us now. Shawn, thanks for coming on the program.
It's great to be with you. Thanks for having me.
You bet. Now, you guys just did a survey of congressional staffers, which was kind of interesting. Tell us a little bit about that, if you would.
That's right. We recently surveyed more than 500 congressional staffers, about half Republican and about half Democratic. And we asked them how they felt about their leadership, meaning the leaders of the Republican Party in Congress and the leaders of the Democratic Party in Congress. And we found a stark contrast. The Republicans were much more lukewarm about their own leaders than the Democrats were. We found, for instance, that House Republican staffers, only 49% of them approved of the job their leadership is doing, whereas the House Democrats, 3 and 4, 77%, said they approved of their leadership. In the Senate, it was also stark. Senate Republican staffers, about 55% said they approved of their leadership. Senate Democratic staffers, it was 86%.
You know, before I get into questions that tip my, own hand here in terms of what my reaction was, what was your reaction to this, Shawn? You cover the Hill. You understand these issues pretty well. Were you surprised?
Well, on the one hand, it is surprising, of course, because the Republicans in the House right now enjoy their largest majority. They have 246 members since 1929. So you'd think they'd be feeling pretty good. And, of course, the Republicans control the Senate as well, having just won it in the 2014 election. So you'd think they'd be feeling better. But on the other hand, of course, we know the House Republicans just ousted longtime Speaker John Boehner. And so we know there's a lot of angst, especially in the House, about the way the Republican leadership has run the chamber, the type of bills they brought to the floor, how hard they fought against President Obama. So in that sense, it's not surprising.
Yeah, okay. Well, that's a good answer. I'm going to resist the temptation to point out that the last time they had that kind of majority in 1929, things didn't work out that well economically. And I'll just move on to say that, okay, so this reads like a tone of discouragement, disillusionment. It seems to, I wonder if this extends to a certain extent to elected Republican officials as well. I'm thinking about the fact that until Paul Ryan agreed to take the job, it seemed that nobody wanted to be Speaker of the House, which is the third in line in succession to the presidency. So that was kind of surprising. Is there just an ennui in the Republican Party because of the split between the, for lack of a better term, the Tea Party faction and the more traditional Republicans?
I think so, yes. There's just a tremendous amount of frustration because here they've worked hard to gain control of both chambers of Congress, and they've promised voters that they will repeal Obamacare, that they will pursue other conservative priorities, they will repeal the Dodd-Frank law, and they haven't been able to do it because they don't control the presidency. And so even though that's sort of where the chips fall in our system of government, some Republicans in the House feel that if they fought a little harder, they would be more successful. And I think the reluctance to lead that group is because many of these prospective leaders realize that there's really nothing they can do until Republicans win the White House.
I have some exposure to Hill staffers, and I know you probably have had more over the years, but question for you, how ideological do you think these Republican staffers are compared to either Democratic staffers? Are they in it for ideological reasons? Are they in it for career reasons, a kind of mix, or we just can't know?
Yeah, well, I think it's certainly a mix, and in our survey, we don't know which staffers from which offices responded, so it would be hard to generalize. But I think a lot of staffers, certainly if you're going to go work for a Republican, you have conservative leanings, but how hard you lean to the right, that can differ. I mean, I think a lot of staffers, the more professional ones, realize that their job is representing their member, and if their member is more conservative than them, they'll speak to that, but it may not reflect their own views.
Yeah, it would be interesting. I guess there's no way of knowing. It would be interesting to know if the more hard right Tea Party members, staffers were more discouraged, less discouraged than the more traditional Republicans. But I guess there would be no way of breaking that out from your survey, huh?
Not the way we did it this time, no.
Now, let me ask you, we're talking with Shawn Zeller of CQ Weekly about a survey of Hill staffers that showed a lot of discouragement among and lack of faith in their own leadership among Republican staffers. Let me ask you something, Shawn. At what point during this crazy succession process, after John Boehner said he was leaving and before a new speaker had been settled, there was a lot of chaos during that process. At what point during all of that was this survey conducted?
It was done the week that the House voted to elevate Paul Ryan to the speakership. So Paul Ryan's ascension at that point was guaranteed. The prior weekend, he had said he would accept the job, and he had accepted it on the condition that the various factions endorse him. So everyone knew that week that Paul Ryan was going to be the speaker. So when we asked what people thought of their leadership, it could have reflected certainly, the outgoing Boehner, since he didn't leave until the end of that week, as well as the incoming Ryan. But we did ask another question, which was, do you think Paul Ryan will be granted a honeymoon period? Meaning, are Republicans going to ease up, give him some space to lead before they start complaining? And again, the results were telling. Only 50% of the House Republicans thought that Ryan would get a honeymoon, and that was, a pretty low number, we thought, given that this guy had been basically drafted for the job, that no one else wanted it, and people and members had to beg him essentially to take it.
And given the fact that he kind of insisted on one as a precondition for taking the job, I mean, he can't really insist on it, but he did as much as he could to demand it by saying he wanted the support of all wings and groups. You'd think, and if there's ever a honeymoon period, it's the week you take the job. So, in other words, they're saying, the way I interpret it, but correct me if you have a different take on it, but the way I interpreted it is even at the peak moment when there should have been something like a honeymoon for Paul Ryan, there was a huge chunk of them were saying, nah, it's not going to work.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. And I think you have to consider also the context, which was that Boehner had said and followed through during his final month as Speaker that he was going to clean the barn, and meaning he was going to do some things that many of the conservatives in the Republican Party weren't going to like, that they had been protesting for a long time. And he did that. He reached a 2-year budget agreement with the administration, which allows the agencies to receive some additional money beyond what the budget caps were going to allow, and provides for some cuts in other areas that are supposed to balance that out. Now, a lot of the conservatives did not like that deal because they liked those budget caps, and they felt that the cuts were really phony. They were accounting gimmicks, a lot of them. And secondly, the deal raised the debt ceiling up until after the next presidential election into 2017. And so conservative Republicans, as you recall, they view that debt ceiling, which Congress has to raise periodically so that the government can continue to pay its bills. They view that as a key point of leverage, and they wanted more concessions in order to raise it.
So another element of this might be that the Republicans lack confidence in their leadership because they felt they kind of sold them out on this deal.
Absolutely, yes. And there's another big budget fight coming because just 1 month from now, the continuing resolution that is currently funding government agencies expires. And on December 11th, Congress is either going to have to pass another one or is going to have to pass an appropriations bill that will cover the spending for fiscal 2016. And the budget agreement they just reached will govern that, but there's going to be policy fights over riders. The Planned Parenthood issue certainly could arise, and that's going to be a tough one for Paul Ryan to deal with.
Yeah, that is interesting. And let's talk just for a second about the Democrats. Were you at all surprised that Democratic Hill staffers were as supportive of their leadership as they are? I mean, one way to view their situation is that, hey, they lost the House, they lost the Senate. Why should they be so happy with their leadership?
I think you're right. I mean, certainly Harry Reid, of course, has said, the Senate leader, Democratic leader, has said he will be retiring at the end of this Congress. But Nancy Pelosi, the House Democratic leader, has made no similar announcement. She's been the House Democratic leader for several years now, and things have not gone so well in recent years. So you'd think there might be a rebellion in the works, but there has been no sign of it at all. And the only thing I can think about that is that when you're in the minority, it's easier to remain united. Mm-hmm. You know that you need to stick together to reach the goal, which is regaining the majority.
And it also seems to me, and we're talking with Shawn Zeller of CQ Weekly, I was also wondering when I saw your survey whether, in fact, it seems that in opposition, the Democrats may be achieving more ideological unity as well. You know, you had, 43 out of 44 Senate Democrats voting for the expansion of Social Security, which is something that would have been unthinkable a few years ago. Is it possible that they now feel a sense of shared mission that maybe the Republicans do not?
Yeah, you make a good point, because the Democrats are in the minority now, and who lost those seats in 2014? They were the Democrats who were in more marginal districts, probably the more conservative or moderate Democrats. So who remains? It's the progressives, the liberals, and Nancy Pelosi is a liberal, and so it's no surprise that they like her.
Yeah, okay, and I think that's a fascinating conclusion. Pivoting back just one last time to the Republicans, what, if anything, are you looking for going forward in this? Do you think this augurs poorly for the Republicans and their party unity going forward into the budget fight in December and then next year's session?
I think we're going to have another fight this coming month over the budget, and people are going to be unhappy coming out of that. It wouldn't surprise me, though, if going into a presidential election year, if the politics on the Hill calm down a bit, because, of course, the politics in the country will be heating up. And so the Hill, normally during a presidential election year, they put aside tough issues so that it doesn't disturb their campaigns. So I'm thinking 2016 is going to be a quiet year on the Hill, but a pretty busy one out in the States.
So one last question for you. You mentioned in your piece that Paul Ryan, as Speaker, has said that he wants the Republican Party to be a party of proposition, not opposition. They've widely been seen as obstructing the Democratic agenda. He says he wants to make proposals going forward. Anything in this survey that gives you a sense that he can really do that, or is that another area of difference between the Tea Party and whatever faction Ryan represents?
I think it's going to be very difficult in an election year to bring forth new ideas and enact them into law. But one of the questions we asked does indicate that there's a thirst for it. We asked, what can Congress do to improve its reputation? And the number one answer was to pass a tax overhaul bill. And of course, Paul Ryan is a big enthusiast for doing that. He was, prior to becoming Speaker, the chairman of the Ways and Means Committee, which writes tax law, and really does want to write a big tax overhaul, the last one of which we had was in 1986. And pretty much everyone agrees we could use another one. But the The problem is reaching agreement on the details, and that is going to be very, very tough.
And as an ideologue myself, I have to say I might not be thrilled with in fact, I can almost guarantee I would not be thrilled with what Ryan comes up with, but at least he would be coming through with his promise to be a party of proposition in that case. So, well, this is going to be fascinating to watch. Are you guys going to do this survey again?
We're going to do it every month, and we'll ask some of the same questions each month, so we'll get a good idea of how the answers vary over time.
Well, I hope at some point you'll come back and tell us how things are trending over time. And appreciate you coming on the program. Shawn Zeller, senior writer for CQ Weekly. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.